HiSec Buyback offers a 90% JITA anywhere in HiSec. Simply go to hisec.evebuyback.com, appraise your items, create a contract, and get paid quickly.
This is Talking in Stations, a show about EVE Online. I'm your host, Artimus Albosa, alone in JITA 4.4 with thousands of other players in EVE Online. Today on the show, we've got quite a few things to go over. We're going to give you some updates to some storylines we've been following over the past few weeks and months. Boy, wars take a long time at EVE Online in 2021. We've also got some updates to the From Extraction to Production dev blog. An update to an update to an update, which I'm sure many of you industrialists will love to hear, and even you PvP pilots who wants to know what's going to happen to the prices of your ships going into the future. So let's go ahead and jump right in. If I pull up my browser here, I think today we're going to start with some PvP news, and then we'll make our way over to the in-game news. So first and foremost, just a notable kill. We had a Scary Wormhole People, TD Sin, Dark Space Initiative. You may recognize that name as they are the alliance and corporation with Exuki as the figurehead. He used to do a wormhole show for us here on TIS. There was a lot of drama with like TD Sin joining Init back in the day. I'm going to be honest, I don't actually remember what the resolution to that storyline was, but there was some drama happening, and he lost to Vendentta. Vendentta is the Serpentis super capital. It's based on the Nyx, but it is a pirate faction super carrier, and so it is absurdly expensive, even for super capitals nowadays, and it got ganked by White Sky. So just, you know, traveling around in your expensive ships, you got to be careful. Unfortunately, the hunters were more ready and able to attack than the prey was careful in this particular instance. 126 bill, yeah, it is very expensive. If I were willing to bet, I'd say it's even more expensive than this. Z-kill prices, especially when it comes to more expensive ships, can be a little bit off, and that's not to discredit Z-kill. Squiz does a lot of work to make sure that the prices are accurate, but when you're dealing with rare or extremely difficult to acquire or produce ships, such as super capitals to begin with, but then pirate faction ones, estimating prices is extremely troublesome. Whoopsie daisies. And I'm personally curious, what was the highest voted? Press F to pay respects. Fair enough. I'm very glad it wasn't, it would have lived if it was a shield super. Alright, so that's some interesting news. Just a kill, a notable kill to keep an eye on. Let's talk about the Sov map, which I am quite a fan of. I enjoy all the various stories and wars and intrigue and espionage that happens over time. A few things to note. In the past, if you've watched the show, you know we've been watching two major conflicts in EVE Online. The first, and the longest running, has been going on effectively since the end of the Pappy invasion of Delve, and it even started during that invasion, and that was the expansion of Wrecking Crew, headed up by Dreadbomb, making their way from Providence out into Catch and into the rest of these regions which were formerly held by Legacy Coalition before that coalition died. We also had Fire Coalition setting up over here, who were previously affiliated with Legacy Coalition and have been expanding in their absence. They have been holding lots of space over in Insmother, Detrid, Wicked Creek, etc., and they've been pushing out into Legacy space as well. Then we had newcomers to the group, also relatively affiliated with Legacy Coalition, Army of Mango's Alliance, and their new coalition PIBC, Pan Intergalactic Business Community, who live in Omist and Esoteria. And so the battle lines were effectively drawn. We've got Dreadbomb sort of spearheading Wrecking Crew, coming in from Providence and Catch out into this way. Then we had AOM and PIBC from Esoteria and Omist, and then we had Fire Coalition coming down from the north-ish east side of the map. And all of the fighting was happening in Amensi and Tenerifis. Now, Amensi has effectively been ceded to Fire Coalition, so it is relatively stable now, and the fighting recently has been happening in Tenerifis. And in addition to that, we've also seen some expansion into the surrounding regions of NPC nullsec of all places, specifically Curse and Great Wildlands. Now, there is a smaller conflict happening in Great Wildlands with a lot of RPers getting involved, given the Minmatar heritage in and around that area. But for generally the southern conflict, we'll have Shen on tomorrow night with Nick Bison, and they have a whole lot more boots on the ground knowledge of the conflict, so they'll give you a better update. Just wanted to let you know things are happening down here. Last we spoke 2 weeks ago, I made some speculation, and my speculation was that we had recently seen fights where the larger powers were becoming involved in this conflict. So we had the Initiative and other members of the Imperium fighting alongside PIBC and RC, and then we had Test and some other members of PAPI, formerly PAPI, now PandaFam, Pandemic Horde, were fighting alongside Fire Coalition. And my guesstimate was that this was going to put a slowdown on the conflict, because when these larger powers are involved, the FCs have to be a whole lot more careful on what they risk, when, and where, because the probability of escalation with outside bat phones is significantly higher. So we'll see tomorrow, based on what Shen and the team have for us, if my speculation was accurate. In other news, you may have spotted it already down here on the side. We've got lots of Sov moves, which are unexpected, and lots of alliance movements. One I do want to quickly talk about while we're in this general area of space: Reckless Contingency dropped 1761, and Northern Coalition gained 1718. That is awfully symmetric. Let's talk about that. Reckless Contingency previously lived in Catch, or Cache, or Cache, depending on your persuasion, and all of their corporations, or at least the vast majority of them, have left and moved over to Northern Coalition, NC Dot, a very storied alliance. And one curious little tidbit, courtesy of Matterall, is that Northern Coalition have had a long-time feud, a historic feud, if you will, with a Russian alliance known as Solar Fleet. And Solar Fleet's longtime home was Cache. Now, as far as I'm aware, Solar Fleet is effectively no more, at least under their previous leadership. And so Northern Coalition owning sovereignty in Cache is sort of just a bit of an oddball little tidbit of information in the historical context of things. So we have Reckless Contingency, I believe. I'm not sure if this is what you would call a Y dot. For those unfamiliar with the term, there was an infamous incident back in the day. I think even before the Imperium was called the Imperium, they were called the CFC. There was an alliance who was effectively all of their corporations were taken apart out of one alliance and shoved into another. And it caused a whole load of drama, people talking about them forcing out leaders and all sorts of other nonsense. But over time, we've seen this happen more and more in EVE Online. A member of TIS staff, Carneros, is the alliance head of the Bastion. And the Bastion actually formed as a result of the merging of multiple smaller alliances. So it's an interesting thing to keep an eye on. The drama occurs when it's not necessarily wanted by the members of corporations and alliances. So we'll have to keep an eye on. Right now, all the corporations themselves have moved from Reckless Contingency over to Northern Coalition, and Northern Coalition has taken over their space. But if individual corporations or individual members of those corporations decide they don't like the new leadership, they don't like the new style, what have you, they may choose to leave. So we'll have to keep an eye on Northern Coalition and their space in Cache and their new corporations to see if anybody moves out to greener pastures, so to speak. In other Alliance news, we have some interesting movements from Initiative and Brave Collective. So Brave Collective we've talked about before up in the Pureblind conflict or other major conflict we've been tracking over the past few weeks. And they recently lost a very large corporation. Industrial Mining and Mayhem. And curiously enough, they went over to the Initiative. Imagine that. So like I mentioned, they are a very large corporation, nearing 1,000 members, just in their main corporation. But this isn't the full extent of this. And what I want to show you is Brave United. So this is actually the alliance that I am a member of. And it is like the HiSec non-war deckable arm of Brave Collective. And what occurred is that when Industrial Mining and Mayhem left Brave Collective proper, their HiSec group left Brave United. So that's another 628 characters. They could be regular player characters, they could just be HiSec alts. It's probably a mix of the two. But just so you have a full grasp of the size of this move, you've got to consider both the main corporation themselves and also the HiSec group, who is, as of right now, just on their own, unwar deckable. Alright, and you know what? While we're talking about Brave, let's have a look over at Pureblind. So the story of Pureblind is really the story of Brave Collective post the big war, the Pappy invasion of Delve. After the war, Brave Collective left Legacy Coalition as it sort of disbanded, and were given a couch to crash on by PandaFam over in Geminates. And it was with the explicit note that they had to move. It was not a permanent solution. They knew they were going to be leaving. It's just a matter of to when and to where. And earlier this year, they decided Pureblind was the space to go. It's adjacent to Fraternity, who live in the Tribute Vale Venal area. And so they struck a deal with Fraternity, moved through their space into Pureblind, and some other political shenanigans have been going on with the residents, and they've since set up shop. And they've taken over what was previously the Flying Dangerous constellation here near the Saranin entrance, and haven't done much apart from that. I'm free to admit that I was wrong. I did not think it would be possible for you to fit a 12,000 man alliance into just a single constellation in Pureblind, but apparently they're doing it. One may say that they're not doing it particularly well if they're losing large alliances, or pardon me, large corporations, but that's a tale to be told in the future. You can't make long-term predictions about success or failure from a single data point. They have, curiously enough, taking a single other iHub over in Banderlog's space. I personally thought they were going to expand out here. I thought this is the obvious, the logical next expansion for Brave, but Banderlogs have put up one heck of a fight and have made it very difficult for them. So in fact, if we check out Pureblind timer history, you'll see the last timer took place on the 21st of November. So it has been over a week since a timer was generated in Pureblind. I think it's fairly safe to say until something sparks additional conflict, we're not going to see it happening here. One side or the other is going to need a fire lit under their butt to make them want to make a change in the current area, but it seems we've reached a bit of an equilibrium. All right, well, let's talk about some space where there isn't equilibrium. Specifically, let's talk about Cloud Ring. Cloud Ring, if we're looking at the map, this is a new area of conflict we haven't talked about for a while. It's just adjacent, actually, to Pureblind and to Fade. It's also adjacent to Fountain, which is the home of the Initiative, who just gained a few thousand members. And in Cloud Ring, it has been an area of space controlled, so to speak, by Triumvirate, who are an interesting and very storied alliance who's gone through many allegiance changes and many leadership changes. So I don't think I can do justice of characterizing them, but suffice it to say they were living here, and they have since come under attack by members of the Imperium, or at least Imperium-aligned alliances, specifically Ranger Regiment and FXR, who is French Connection. Both are groups who have previously lived in the north and moved down. are now coming back. FXR are perennially, at least in my memory, residents of the Purblind Fade area, and they're making their way back in. Ranger Regiment used to be part of Guardians of the Galaxy Coalition, if memory serves, so you can imagine them living further up north in the Declan area. But both of these groups are now coming up, and it's an interesting time zone situation we're looking at. French Connection, if memory serves, and in fact, let's look. So if we look up French Connection, they are a heavy EUTZ alliance. So they've got a lot of folks coming right around, if I can click to enlarge here, this 17, 18, 1900 Eve time zone. So they're EUTZ focused. Then you've got Ranger Regiment, who are a Chinese group, if memory serves. Yep, so they're coming in earlier. So sort of Ranger Regiment will start early, sort of that Russian-Chinese time zone coming out of AUTZ, and then it'll transition into French Connection time zone of EUTZ. And I'm going to be honest, I don't even know what triumvirate is nowadays. Seems triumvirate is EUTZ, but skewing more towards US. So instead of 17, 18, 19, they're 18, 19, 20, and further later into the night for our Euro bros. So this creates an interesting situation, especially if Ranger Regiment can get a foothold in La Save. If Ranger Regiment starts taking significant portions of Save, their time zone is going to be such that it's very hard for Triumvirate to contest. There will be some overlap in the EUTZ, but in that period of overlap, Triumvirate will have to be fighting French Connection at full strength and Ranger Regiment at reduced strength, while Triumvirate themselves are at relatively reduced strength. So just given the size of the alliances at play, given the ability for the Imperium-aligned alliances to call in help if they so desire, we are directly adjacent to initiative space over here in Fountain. I don't suspect the Triumvirate is going to be able to hold all of the space that they previously owned if these other alliances decide they want it. Now, where the equilibrium is going to be reached, whether Triumvirate will be kicked out entirely, is yet to be seen. How much fight they can put up in resistance and how long they can draw this out is definitely going to be a point of focus. And also, like with other conflicts we've been looking at, there's always the question of escalation. How big does this get? Who gets bat-phoned? We talked a little bit about Ranger Regiment and French Connection, who they may look to bat-phone from the Imperium. In terms of Triumvirate, they, if memory serves, spent a little bit of time over in the drone regions, living next door to Slice, so they would have some connections to PanFam. And then also up north here, just something I want to point out, we have Volta. And Volta was in an interesting political situation with Brave moving into Purblind. They struck a phenomenal deal, in my opinion, where they could basically do whatever they wanted to. They could fight whoever they wanted to, and they wouldn't break any truces, break any agreements, etc., etc., and instead they would just strengthen relationships by any choice that they made. And with the fighting in Purblind dying down, I would not be surprised if you have some members, maybe some FCs, some content creators from Volta, looking at this new conflict in Tri and thinking, what sort of trouble can we get up to? Now again, you're going to have a bit of a time zone issue. Let me look up Volta here and check when their activity tends to be. Yeah, so Volta is very similar to Triumvirate in that they are EUTZ skewing into USTZ. So they wouldn't necessarily be able to fill in any time zone coverage gaps that Triumvirate may have if they chose to side with them. But they could strengthen them in terms of defending their own timers. So that's just something to keep an eye on. We haven't seen any indication that Volta intends to ally, but I think if I'm a member of Triumvirate and I have any connections whatsoever, they're probably the first on my speed dial. All right, so that's a look around the map in terms of what's been going on. Of course, there are lots of other small things occurring that we just don't have time or the sources to discuss, publicly at least. So it's worth keeping an eye on. Some other things of note. Who was it? I think Shen will talk a little bit more about this tomorrow, and I'm sorry I forgot to mention it earlier when I was discussing them. But down in the Wrecking Crew Dread Bomb fight, some alliances or some corporations have been leaving Dread Bomb. In fact, if you look at them, they have seen quite a precipitous drop in their sovereignty, in their corporations, and in their members. And one thing to note, though, is that the corporations which are leaving aren't leaving the side of the war. They're just leaving Dread Bomb, at least for the most part. So the Sigma Grindset and Hero Coalition, as I understand it, are both staying in the area, staying aligned with Wrecking Crew. So there is certainly some internal movement occurring. As far as how that's going to impact the progression of this war, we'll have to wait and see, and we'll make sure we'll keep you informed as that goes along. Try our Volta allies, is what I'm being told. We're already in the fight. Well, okay. Alright, well let's see what we can see then. Lots of tribute stuff. Pureblind, Declan, Pureblind. Pureblind. Now, it very well could be, like, there's always limitations to the information we have available. Sometimes in EVE Online, you have sources from diplomats, sources from FCs, sources from line members. And then sometimes what I personally prefer to do is look at the kill board, because kill boards, unlike people, don't lie to you, and they don't have agendas. You can see, okay, who's fighting who killed who, and then use some periphery information to determine the why. As far as I'm seeing, it's not much happening in the Cloud Ring area from Volta. Now, this very well could be that Volta is just showing up to timers and they're getting blue-balled, so there are no kill mails showing up. It could be that the threat of the bat phone alone is going to result in fights going their way, specifically, as I mentioned before, if it's in that EU-US time zone, which is outside of both the time zone coverage of French Connection and Ranger Regiment. So, if I'm incorrect, we'll find out next week as we have more timers and more fights occurring, and we can see Volta showing up more. So thank you for that tidbit of information. Alright, one other story as we transition a little bit into some CCP related news. It occurred to me while I was just thinking, it's a dangerous thing to do, that we often hear about the PCU in times when it's trending downward. It's sort of like you only hear about it when it's going down. I personally don't like the PCU as a metric for determining EVE's success. Why? Well, because it's only a single data point. It shows you how many players are online at any given time. And there are so many confounding factors to determining how many players are logged in at any given time that, in my opinion, but I think it's a pretty good one, the PCU can't be used as a supporting argument that one particular change or one particular movement or anything really is good or bad for this game as a whole. Now, dramatic drops, which I think we saw like during Blackout as an example, could show you that, like, hey, something needs to be adjusted because less players are in space. And it's certainly like you will feel in game a PCU drop. The PCU is important. It is just not useful in terms of determining the effectiveness of any given change to the game. But I wanted to take a look at it just on a random day because I wanted to see, okay, were the people who back in July saying this game is dead, it's dying, it's going to go down forever, if they were right, if the people saying, oh no, it's just the summer slump, it'll rebound higher than it ever was, like, what's the deal there? And so far, as best as I can tell, since August, it's been relatively stable. So there you go, there's your update on the PCU. I'm not going to say that this means anything about any recent changes because I don't think you can say that. I just wanted to give you an update in case you had in the past heard various people saying Eve is dead, Eve is dying, the PCU tells us this or that. Here's another data point for your consideration. Eve is dying since 2003, by the way. Ah, so true. All right. Let's talk about the big news, the stuff that you're probably tired of hearing about, or you just can't get enough of it. It's from extraction to production, an update to an update to an update. Now, fortunately, CCP Psych, my hero, has been doing amazing work with updating not only through the comments, but also updating the original post, so we can see sort of the current state of the changes as proposed. And the most recent update we got, it happened on November 29th, so this Sunday, I think a little bit after we recorded our show, so we didn't get to talk about it. But the most recent changes for our mining ships that had specialized holds, those are all being combined back together. And the overall hold is being increased across the board. So you can see here, there's a shiny table telling us old values, new values, etc. We're also seeing some changes to the moon ore, R4, ubiquitous moon ore, a hotly contested subject. The original proposal was to remove the minerals from them. This falls in line with CCP's vision for resource distribution in EVE Online. They want some minerals to be only available in certain areas of space. The minerals that came out of R4 ore were therefore available in wormhole space and in nullsec when they shouldn't have been under the previous scheme. So they wanted to get rid of them. The players cried out saying, hey, this is going to be bad for cap production. Caps are already super expensive. This is a problem. So CCP came in and said, okay, well, we'll remove the T1 minerals, but then we'll stick in some PI. That should help because there's a bottleneck going on with a particular capital construction component which requires low-level P1 PI, planetary interaction materials. So that was sort of a compromise, a response to the player feedback they got. The player feedback then was, well, the issue isn't really the quantity of PI. We can harvest PI just fine. The issue is moving it around. And there was some discussion back and forth because the changes as proposed were less volume than the minerals in terms of the PI that was being stuck out. But CCP has just decided, you know what, it's okay. We'll table this for the future, and for the time being, they're not going to touch R4 moon ore. So it will continue to maintain the minerals, pyrite and something else, I forget what it is, going into the future, pyrite and mexilon. And also their rate will be doubled per like the doubling of quantity of everything else that's happening with this update. They do mention like it's happening in the future. It's gonna come down the pipe. So if you're an industrialist and you're planning out production lines for the future, don't rely on minerals coming from your moon ore. Like, it's just not a safe plan if that's what you're planning on. You've been given warning, plan accordingly. But apparently it's going to wait until after compression changes and other things. So we'll have to see the state of capital production then in terms of what impact the removal of these basic minerals will have. Also worth noting, these basic minerals are used for reactions, not just producing ship hulls, but for reactions to produce T2 components. So that's another confounding factor to the various perspectives on this change. Other changes, they want to make adjustments to PI in order to reduce manufacturing costs, and they're going to talk about that more in an upcoming Winter Outlook blog. This has been talked about a lot. I am looking forward to it quite a bit. It's going to be fun to talk about and to analyze and to hear everyone's perspectives on. And apparently it is going to be huge. The way CCP initially described it was a lot like the July update we received, where they talked about the end of scarcity and all that sort of thing. So definitely keep an eye out for that. You can bet as soon as it drops, we'll be talking about it. But when that happens, they're also considering reducing the volume of all PI, which is going to be awesome. I have, in the past, done PI in a wormhole, just personally, and gave up on it for two reasons. Number one, I couldn't haul it all out. It was just too much of a hassle to haul my PI from inside my wormhole out. Now, I was the kind of player who just looked at, okay, what is the easiest thing I can set up, have to touch as little as possible, and get the most ISK out of. I wasn't trying to build fuel blocks. I wasn't trying to build nanite paste. I was just ISK per week, per click. And that meant a lot of P3 materials and P2 materials, which have a relatively high volume, because as you go up in the tier, you go down in volume. And so that was partly on me, just the choice of what I decided to produce. But if you're building certain capitals or super capitals, you don't get to make that choice because the inputs are going to be at the different tiers. So just a volume reduction across the board would be a very welcome change for a lot of industrialists out there. And CCP is seriously considering that. All right. Well, those are the major changes. If you want to see a recap, they've also had some recent changes to like the mining waste. Compression is no longer slated for the upcoming patch. And there's been some changes to the crystals. You can check them all out. We'll have a link in the description. So you can go update yourself on what they all are if you didn't hear it already on one of our previous episodes. I'm going to quickly take a moment and see what the thoughts are in chat, because we've been having some discussion. People want PI to be removed entirely, and they want it to be similar to reactions. That's an interesting thought. Not active gameplay, it's borked. I mean, we have quite a few members on the TIS staff who do PI. I think Nick Bison, who's in the chat right now, can talk to you. He was talking to us early in the show, where he got home from work and he started updating his planets, and he's got like 36 or something like that. It's a good source of income for a lot of players to spending on your space. I've lived in wormholes off and on for years. Whenever you move into the wormhole, the first thing you hear from your corp mates is, so what are you doing with your PI? It's just the facts of life. Similar with nullsec, if you're a newer player, the skill point entry to get into PI is relatively low. And so if you're a newer player, the ISK from PI, although relatively small, is more valuable to you. It's also easier to get and isn't active gameplay. So the thing that some people dislike is a good thing for newer players who are maybe more limited on their time commitment to the game, or aren't willing to commit that much time to the game because they're still new. They aren't committed as much. So in terms of PI as it stands, yes, could use some quality of life love, certainly, along with a lot of other changes to this game. But I think as a whole, I'm pretty happy with the concept. All right, another bit of information, something that I missed and was notified of this week. All of the Alliance Tournament matches have been uploaded to YouTube. CCP made what is in my mind a brilliant decision, where they uploaded one of them. I think it was match 1, Tissue versus the Minions, and made it public, but then they uploaded the rest of them unlisted. So this means if you're like me and you're subscribed to the CCP Games EVE Online YouTube channel, your sub box isn't spammed by a million videos. But they are still all accessible through this playlist, which I will link to. So you can go and have a watch. Certainly a fantastic time. The YouTube watching experience, I think, is superior to Twitch. So I'd highly recommend, if you didn't watch it on Twitch, go ahead and take a watch on YouTube. You can skip through, fast forward as you so choose. You can pick through and find the alliances that you are invested in, or the teams that you're invested in. Or you can go watch the crazy finals that occurred. Whatever your choice, they are here. You might not have seen them before, so I wanted to let you know. And last but certainly not least, the sales continue. There was a Black Friday sale, now we're in the Cyber Monday sale. Lasts until December 2nd, so you've still got a few days from the time of this recording. And there are going to be various discounts across all packs on the EVE store, the Epic Games Store, and Steam. As far as the details on the different packs, there are just too many to go through right now, but if that's of your interest, you can go and check it out. Suffice to say, Plex, game time, skins, that sort of thing. Oh, and skill points are going to be things you could get on sale. Also with that, you can get some free skins if you're buying multi-character training or if you're buying Omega time. Specifically, there's a Drekavac and a Kikimora skin that come with Omega and multi-character training. So if you like some skins, if you like those ships, if you are just going to buy Omega anyway, and so you might as well get some extra ISK out of it by selling the skin, then now's probably the time to do it. Alrighty. Well, that'll do it for tonight's episode of Talking in Stations. I will let you know tomorrow we're going to have Shen and Nick Bison on. We're going to hear a lot about the war down south, get some further boots on the ground information there. On Thursday, I don't know what I'm allowed to say. It's going to be a fun show. I hear we've got a guest scheduled. Rundle's going to be there. He's always great to listen to. So definitely tune in on Thursday. We'll be back again. And then we've got some stuff planned for this Sunday too. So Talking in Stations back up and running on our normal schedule after we all took a little bit of a break for the holidays. And we'll see you tomorrow. Maybe not. Yep, we'll see you tomorrow.